Awun dwashmayaneth qaddash shmach te malkutach nehwe suyanach ikenna dwashmaya abbara حولان لحمة سنكانا يومنا واشوق لان حوبين إكنا داب حنان شوقا لحيوين لا تعلن نسيونا إلا قصا من بيشة متول دي لاخي ملكوثة حي لو تشبحطة العالم عالمين Amen. Well, I've been diving deep into the teachings of Jesus, and if you're watching this on YouTube and you haven't attended the actual live session, feel free to subscribe to the channel, but also you can reach out to nuhra.com. The link is on the YouTube front page, and contact us, and maybe you'll get the link. And if you're available, you can join these sessions live. And the benefit of that is you can ask questions directly. Typically, the talks we try to keep them at about half an hour, and then the rest of it is mainly Q&A covering questions that we get throughout the week and during the session. So that's the benefit of subscribing and attending. Plus, you get the link directly to some of these sessions that sometimes we do not release to the general public. So today, what I wanted to talk about is the word peace. That's been on my mind, and I went and searched. In the Bible, the word peace is mentioned many times. And I'll start with a verse from the Gospel of Luke. I'm reading Luke 1:79. So this is the angel and Jesus's mom speaking. I think the story was added later, but the essence of what the prediction here is that this baby Jesus, okay, now they went back. Now we don't know much about Jesus before he declared himself and came and went to went to John, his cousin John the Baptizer, and went to the desert to figure out what his ministry was going to be like. So all that stuff is really what, like, if you read the Gospel according to St. Mark, that's where he begins. The Gospel of Matthew, this is getting past the first couple chapters. So most scholars agree that the story of Jesus's mom, with the angel, all the stuff that we see on Christmas, the manger and his birth story, the genealogies, the two different genealogies that are in Luke and Matthew. All that stuff was added later, like anybody famous, like we do, and I've mentioned that before. Anytime you see a new actor or new artist or new politician, you go run to Wikipedia or online and you try to figure out where did they come from, what college did they go to, who were their parents, and we get into the drama of the person, and sometimes we lose, what they're, whether they're good or bad, or politicians, etc. So this is what happened with Jesus. Jesus showed up. He had to be of age to lead and be a rabbi. He had to be learned. He had to be respected. Does not have a bad reputation. Actually, a really very good reputation in his town to get to the level before he declared himself as a rabbi. But here, so this is Luke never was with Jesus. He might have been a young boy or when Jesus was alive, but he's getting these stories. And one of the things that the myths that are starting to develop about Jesus is this conversation between Mary, the mother of Jesus, and the angel. But that's not the point of this. What I wanted to talk about is peace. So in verse 79, it says that what this boy is going to do is to give light to those who sit in darkness and in the shadow of death, to guide our feet into the way of peace. Urha Dishlama. So the way of peace, when you look at the English definition of the word peace, it has typically tranquility. It has some qualities, when I say the word peace in English, it gives you that impression. But I went and dug in, like Aramaic to Aramaic, Aramaic to Arabic, Aramaic to English. And the word peace, the word shlama, the origin of it is surrender, is to surrender. So the way we obtain peace, this is from the get-go. And watch, it's what they're saying about Jesus is he's going to lead us down the path. He will show us the way. Urha means the way or the path. So he's going to work with our psyche, with our understanding view of the world, with the way we behave, with the way we interpret and react to other people's behavior, and learn how to live in this peace, world of peace or state of peace. Now, because it's based on surrender, the hint is right there. What causes us most of our trouble is our desire to force our way, our understanding, even if as we try to find that balance in our life, that the balance in our relationships, the acceptance of why we're here, our destiny, our mission in life, all these big questions that we constantly ask ourselves and ask, why are we here, and so forth. The day-to-day tends to kind of give us a lot of blows that make us wobble at almost all the time. When you're watching the news, there are things that upset you, either about your town or internationally. When you get a message on Facebook or an email from one of your family members or something. Nowadays, a lot of like WhatsApp or a like or a dislike. All these things kind of poke at our state of peace. But because we are constantly, especially in the West, when we think about the word peace, we think about this tranquility and this, state of where everything is working out our way and we have nothing disturbing us. We need the teachings of Jesus to kind of press a reset. First of all, the reset is that understanding of what is the way of peace. What is this word shlama that is used here and is used throughout? There are verses throughout here. I'll read you another one. In John chapter 14, verse 27. I think I marked it. This is Jesus talking to his disciples. He's saying, "Peace I leave with you, my own peace I give you. Not as the world gives, I give to you. Let not your heart be troubled, and do not be afraid." So again, I give you my surrender, or I give you the way to surrender. Remember what I was talking about last week? I was talking about this, to be like God, you have to be all-inclusive. And by the way, last week when I was reading the verses that I put up, I used the singular, though the word itself there is gemire, which is plural. So it doesn't really affect the way I was explaining it, because it was directed at you individually. But when Jesus mentioned it, he mentioned it to all the disciples and apostles, people who were listening to him during his Sermon on the Mount, what we call Sermon on the Mount. But this was the teaching. He wanted everybody to know that they all need to be all-inclusive. So when he's delivering that, when he's saying the Beatitudes, when he's focusing here on changing the way we see ourselves, he wants the mourners to start reconciling out of mourning into a state of peace. So he explains to them what death is. Okay, so when you develop the understanding and you surrender to the fact that death is a part of life. Now, this is normal death, because he wasn't really targeting people who were dying because of oppression. But that also fits. Once you have an understanding of what death is, what your nature, what you are, and what your life is about, and stop worrying about dragging one more day out of this life. And that's most of us, because we are programmed that way, and because society puts so much value on human life without really giving us a clue of like the quality of life is really what's important here. And Jesus was focused on quality, not quantity. Now, that said, I hope each one of his followers, each one of us, everybody who's living on earth does not have a second shorter than they should because of somebody else or because of something bad. We all deserve a very long, happy, tranquil life that is based on surrendering. So what are we surrendering? What is Jesus teaching us to surrender? As I said, a lot of our perceptions, a lot of what our expectations are built because of how society programs us. They tell us you will be happy when you graduate from this grade to the next grade, when you're a child. You will be happy when you get a lot of gifts during the holidays, whatever your holiday is. And plus some of your special days, like your birthday and so forth. We are programmed to have this reward system that supposedly gives us the peace that we need. And a lot of that is great, is full of joy. But if you are underneath all of that, you are not enforcing and teaching how people should coexist. If you're not demolishing concepts like the differences based on color, based on religion, based on language, based on the way you look, based on gender definition. If you're not building the whole society from the ground up, and that's what Jesus was doing. I did a whole 2 or 3 weeks talking about Jesus as an innovator. He and Abraham and the apostles after that, and even Moses. So every step that we are taking, we are building on something that's already in motion and that's being developed as we go. And that's why Jesus was very adamant that what he was developing was just the beginning. He was building foundations. Now, Jesus is a great example of somebody who lost his life, not because he wanted to, but mainly because he didn't want to compromise any of his fundamental teachings. Jesus wanted to go on. He even, we see him in Gethsemane, almost negotiating with God. And he had that relationship where he was talking to God saying, can this cup pass? And I'm sure he, like any one of us, he probably drew on the ground all the different options. Run away right now, because nobody was holding him. He had no shackles on him at that moment, or people guarding the gates, keeping him from running away. He had to ask himself, if I run away, what would that mean to all the time I spent, all my upbringing, everything that led me to this moment? If I run away, this movement would actually just be dismantled. All my disciples and all the people who heard me and started believing in my way, not in me, but in my way, would lose faith in that. And we would be resetting, if we're going backwards ultimately. Then he probably put the second option. Well, I have a whole bunch of guys here, and I have a whole bunch of Galileans who know me as a prophet. We can make some trouble in Jerusalem, and maybe we overthrow the government and start a small revolution, and maybe I end up in the high seat instead of on the cross. And he knew that once he would have gone that violence way, once he would have gone the sword way, everything he built to that moment, it was going to be gone. And then he found the last way is the peace way, the peaceful way. He went like he always affiliated, and his apostles ended up understanding that he was never. They wanted him, that the Messiah was supposed to be the Lion of Judah, the Lion of Israel, the Lion who comes and devours all the enemies and punishes them and rebuild the same exact system that had collapsed. That was their vision. And this is their vision for most governments, most political systems, most political campaigns. We want to get to the top. But then what do we do at the top? Do we make the world a better place? Do we go and dismantle armies and weapons? Do we stop negotiating at the table as enemies? Do we start loving one another and trying to, small countries help big countries and big countries help small countries? We don't do that. We go to the top and then we start thinking the same way we think in our corporate world today. How can I expand? How can I get more? How can I, just possess to the point where we don't even know what the value of possession anymore? How many more couches can you buy and be happy? How many more bonus dollars can you make every year to bring you happiness? It brings you more possession, but it doesn't bring happiness. So Jesus was, so that was option 2, go fight. Then option 3, be the lamb, be the peaceful one, hope for the best. But worst case scenario, if they do take your life, he had already talked about the fact that don't fear the one who takes the physical body away. Fear the one who takes the spirit, who kills the spirit, which means the one who oppresses you. What value would your life be if you felt down and out all the time? Okay, he was not promoting get rid of your own life, so that don't misunderstand me. What he was saying, change your ways. There is a way, even if you are at the bottom of the rankings in your society, there is a way for you. That's why he attracted what was viewed societally as the lowest class, the harlots, the tax collectors, the people who were unclean and dirty because of some illnesses, because their society had defined them as unfit to come in. He went and looked for the people who were mentally ill, or when he ran into them, he did not avoid them. He touched them, he healed them, he reached out. Okay, and in the process, he picked up a lot of middle class and rich people who started following him, religious people who started looking at what their religion was teaching and what Jesus's view of their religion was. So he was recruiting from John the Baptizer's students. He was recruiting from the Sadducees. They were all scratching their heads. They were going like, wow, this is new. This is revolutionary. For the first time, peace is not going to come by the sword. Okay, and even though Jesus himself said at one point, I have come, and the word that's used there, it was not peace. It's quoted a lot. Let me find it. I had it written down. Yeah, Matthew 10:34. So in Matthew 10:34, I have too many parts of the Bible that I'm reading today. 10:34. He says, do not suppose that I have come to bring peace on earth. I have not come to bring peace, but a sword. And he's using here an Aramaic idiom meaning division, because even the word there is not shlama that he uses. He uses a different word. So when he, but he knew that, and the division there is not that I'm not going to come bring the kind of peace that you expect. I'm coming with a new method that's going to divide people. And when we reach that point of majority of people following Jesus's teachings, we will defeat the sword. We will defeat the method of war. We will defeat all the things that you can put in a category for you that's negative. Racism, slavery, which I know here in the West, we've checked that box a long time ago. We didn't. And neither did most of the world. There are forms of slavery that take place. When we start looking at all that more closely and start behaving like Jesus taught us to behave, that's when the whole thing is going to shift. That's when we will know that the balance is going to change. And that's what made Rome scared to, shake in their sandals. They didn't have probably shoes, but the emperor of Rome and the Byzantine emperor, and later a lot of the other countries that Christianity was reaching, they were shaking in their shoes, because these people started becoming the majority. Peace, according to Jesus, was taking place of peace by sword, peace by fear. Okay, fear was a big factor. Now, One of the questions that came, how am I doing on time? I'm getting close. So one of the questions that came to me via actually the YouTube channel is that I should, because I was doing Matthew 5, is can you please do Matthew 38 through 40? Let me read you 38 through 40 because it does relate to that. So I love it when the questions come based on what I'm supposed to be talking on. So Matthew 5. And this 38, you have heard, and these are very famous words of Jesus. I think Dr. Errico covered it the last time he spoke as well. You have heard that it is said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you that you should not resist evil, but whoever strikes you on your right cheek, turn to him the other also. The next one is not quite related, but it's in the same vein. And if anyone wishes to sue you at the court and take away your shirt, let him have your robe also. So what is Jesus talking about here? Remember what I talked about innovation. Moses was innovating, but what Moses' world looked like when he was innovating was 12 very, very tough tribes, and he was wanting to get some society, some structure into them. He was trying to build a new civilization out of tribal nomadic people. Okay, now he came, those people were in Egypt, but they were enslaved. They got in touch with civilization, but they were not quite developing their own. They had no laws. And the law, so Moses then, to get them out of that state of chaos and power and violence, a lot of violence, he basically scared the heck out of them by this new rule. This is why we have it in the Ten Commandments, and in Moses's, there wasn't Ten Commandments, but the Ten Commandments are in the same vein. Is basically him trying to get people not to go steal their neighbor's wife, or rape and adultery was again causing a lot of trouble. So one of the things is that he said, okay, if you poke somebody's eye, we are going to poke your eye. If you kill somebody, we're going to kill you. And of course, after that, they developed a whole bunch of accidental death and unaccidental death. So again, innovation requires then tweaking to make it viable. Otherwise, it does not get implemented correctly, or it loses steam. So now you jump from Moses to Jesus. First century Galilee is a place governed by Romans. The Jewish religion was a lot more organized. They had their own mandates and laws in place, and actually too many of them. So between the Roman law, the law of the land, because now a lot of time has passed, there's more education, civilization is a bit more accepted and developed than nomadic Moses time. So, but Jesus here is going like, okay, you keep using Moses as your true north, as your absolute, like the end of all, as far as law. I need to change that, because we need to get away from that. And that's why he was saying, now where we need to be, okay, and that applies to us today, is when somebody starts a quarrel with you, I need you, he's talking to his followers, I need you to be strong. Because if you retaliate the same way the law of Moses tells you, an eye for an eye, I punch you, you punch me, we are going to escalate and always end in violence, and somebody most likely will lose their life. What I want you to do is practice self-control, take a deep breath, count to 3. We do it today in a lot of our pseudo-psychology and probably in our psychology. It's like, take a deep breath, take a step back, and let the other person understand that you're choosing not to engage with force. Turning the other cheek is just basically you saying, I don't want to get to that level. And let the other person back off. It's risky. And I don't think Jesus by any means was telling us not to he was speaking against self-defense. But there is a big difference between feeling worried and afraid enough about your life to strike back in a case of self-defense, versus what Jesus was talking here, which is people who are aggressive, who would, for anything, these are people who would be like buying stuff at the market and feel like they're being cheated, or that the price was not right, or anything, right? Even if a Roman soldier struck you as a Galilean, as somebody who was like Jesus, he had to think about this. Would I apply this for myself? If a Roman soldier came to me and struck me, okay, I can think like Moses said, an eye for an eye, and go strike him again. What do you think would have happened to Jesus? Dead, most likely, if not probably in jail and miserable and maybe enslaved. So he was thinking, okay, that will work. If some Roman soldier hits me, somebody higher than I am, and I show them, that I'm humble, I'm meek, and I'm a peaceful person, and I don't let my definition of who I am, what I am, override what I've been learning under Jesus, then that moment will pass. That applies constantly in life. If you think about it, people who are mean to you at work, if you become mean to them, you're just going to escalate. It's just going to be step. You'll both end up in HR. Then you'll probably both end up, losing your jobs. But if you go to them and you show meekness and you show that, hey, I don't want to play your game, I want to do it differently. So this is the piece that Jesus. Now, not only does it work in the moment, but it works afterwards, especially if you understand why you're behaving this way. You're not just doing it because Jesus told you so. You're digging deep. Now, this fits also in with other pillars that Jesus gave us. I talk about the pillars of, like, when you start building your life around Jesus, you'll find that these core things that will help you. Forgiveness is one of them. So this concept of the person who hits you, let's say you did walk away and they walked away and all it was is that was one hit. They'll have to process this through their filters. You have to process that moment. You should feel good that you acted according to the teachings, but now you have work to do. You probably have to work on forgiving. Okay, and that's why when Jesus says you have to bless the people who basically abuse you, it's because of that. He wants you not to go feel miserable and weak at your house because of that moment. He wants you to feel very strong and very proud of the fact that you were the meek person here and you stopped the escalation. And then he wants you to work on forgiving that person. So when you see them next time, or when you talk about them, or when their name is mentioned again, because most of these people were in the same town, they knew each other. It's just like most of the people that do hurt us and end up hitting us or hurting us emotionally or in any other way, they are the people who we have to deal with. And he wanted us to kind of reconcile that, to get to that that place of surrender. So it's surrendering, and that's the origin of peace here, is letting go of the concepts that you've inherited and looking for the new Jesus definitions. How to operate, how to take a situation where somebody struck you or somebody is taking you to court. And here here's that teaching about the court. It's along the same lines. You can go and let a third party solve the problem for you. And in most cases, we have hundreds, if not thousands, of examples of people we know that went to court for whatever reason, family over business. A husband and wife who used to love each other, or two spouses who loved each other and went to court, and the lawyers got rich and the court got rich, and probably the tax man got rich, and both got lost a lot, including a lot of, a lot of love, a lot of peace, a lot of time with their children and people who love them. Camps get divided when you go to court. So what Jesus was talking about here is like, before you get to that stage, solve your problems. Do we need to go to court? And if somebody is insistent because they are not followers of Jesus and they are of the mindset of, I am going to get everything, give them what they want and give them a little bit more. He constantly does that. It's idiomatic Aramaic speaking about basically give them more what they're asking. He talks about the soldiers asking you to carry a load from one village to the other, offer to go to, or offer to carry more. And the idea here is by you being meek, truly meek, not playing a game, and putting yourself in first accepting the situation and not resisting it and surrendering to that moment, and then finding that strength that is required for meekness. For you to be humble takes a lot more strength than for you to be the fighter and the one who's wanting what we call justice. So I'll stop here. I think I'm good on time, and I'll answer some of the questions. We do have a Q&A feature in the webinar. If you want to put your questions there, I'll pick them up from there. I have a few questions I need to answer. One of the simplest ones is from last week. Somebody asked which page I was on in the Peshitta when I did the all-inclusive. That was page 7. It's right towards the end of the page. I think it's the last verse or the verse before that. So that's one of the questions. I did cover the question that came through YouTube, but before that, before the Assyrians conquered northern Israel and sent Jewish people into exile, did those in Israel speak and write Hebrew? So yes, the simple answer is yes. They spoke. Hebrew and Aramaic are very close, and they're sometimes referred to as Eastern Aramaic and Western Aramaic, and the difference is the style of the letters. Today, Syriac is just another branch, more modern version of Aramaic, and the actual writing of it becomes more and more kind of like almost cursive or easier to write. People develop shortcuts and so forth. So as a language, though, they did speak it, but then because of the captivity and being away from the land and being forbidden to use it, it got wiped out. So that's why not until I think I want to say 4th, maybe 6th century, when they started putting vowels back on them, which originally the Torah didn't have vowels. People just knew how to do it. So the language developed, and but a lot of it also, because of how close it is to Aramaic helped preserve a lot of that. And so some of the oral tradition was carried forward. Some scholarly stuff throughout the centuries helped kind of restore some of what was there, but I think that's why some of the meanings and so forth are lost forever. There are some words we have to go from Hebrew to like Arabic or something to even get that a hint of what it might have meant back then. So and the same is true even of the Quran. The Quran has some words that are completely cryptic in Arabic, and some scholars today and some experts attribute that to possibly it makes sense it's probably from Aramaic, and because the Aramaic was the dominant language, and we know that the Prophet Muhammad did travel to Aram in his journeys with the traders, so he must have been exposed to that. Plus, it was dominant in trade coming into Mecca where he lived. So all that plays into it, into the history of that. Those three languages are so closely tied together. Mainly Aramaic is the mother tongue. Hebrew is kind of like an early branch of it, and Arabic is a more advanced branch coming a little later. And did Jesus speak and read Hebrew and Aramaic? Most scholars agree that he spoke Aramaic, and they don't talk much about Hebrew. I know if you watch again shows like Chosen, the Chosen, or the one with the Kafizul, the Passion of Christ, they kind of mangle a little bit of Hebrew with a little bit of Aramaic. But most likely the Hebrew that you hear was really implied, but I think Jesus spoke specifically Eastern Aramaic, Galilean Aramaic, and we can get that also when we read in the Bible about the episodes with Peter, the apostles, about your speech betrays you and so forth, because the Judean ones had a different Aramaic dialect in the south than they did in the north, which carried over to the time of, to this day, to be honest. If you go to visit the Palestinian people or the Jordanians and the Syrians and Lebanese, the ones who still use Aramaic or Arabic, what we call Levantine Arabic, speak with them, ask them about closely how different is it to speak the same Levantine Arabic, which is almost a hybrid between Aramaic and Arabic, between like southern Palestine, mid-Palestine, northern Palestine, Lebanon, Syria. It changes so much. I mean, we all speak Levantine, and it's village to village. So even to this day, the idea of these languages being closely related and yet different enough to let an expert or somebody who's from one village identify, hey, you're not from our village. So that's kind of, those languages are closely tied together. But I think Jesus spoke Galilean Aramaic. He probably understood Judean Aramaic and so forth. So same way I would understand Egyptian, or Libya has an Eastern and a Western dialect. So different places. I grew up in the Emirates and Libya and so forth. I can understand Arabic, and I've dealt with Sudanese Arabic, and but it's subtle. We don't speak it in the house. The house you speak one way, and then you have all these other ways of, and sometimes you go like, time out, what are you saying exactly? And the further west you go, like to Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, it continues to change, because then you have Berber influencing some of it. So the Arabic there, sometimes it's easier for me to speak English to somebody from those countries than it is to agree on Arabic, unless we go back to like very basic Arabic. Anyway, enough about the language. That the Near East is a new term for me. The Library of Congress, it appears, does not place Israel in the Near East. Are we following terminology from Dr. Lamza? Actually, the term Near East was the dominant term until recent history, because if you think the Near Eastern people don't think of themselves as Near East. Every people think of themselves as the center of the world, and then as you go left and right, you start defining the people next to you. So if you think about the term Middle East, came from mainly when the US became more prominent. That term before that originated in Europe, and Europe looked at what we call today the Middle East as the Near East, and then the Middle East was kind of more like Iran, Afghanistan area, and then you got the Far East. So when I use the term Near East, probably equivalent today, and an accepted term is the Middle East. So I'm still using, maybe my bias is that the Europeans, because I grew up in that area, and in the Middle East, it's accepted. The word MENA now means the Middle East and North Africa, and a lot of businesses today, they open offices MENA region, and it's taken hold. So, but good question. Sometimes I say things without thinking about them. So Near East is the Middle East. It used to be the Near East. I understand original sin was created for control of people, but could it have been awkwardly a reference to lessons we need to learn in this life carried over through karma? I studied a lot of the original sin from the Hebrew perspective, which in their writing is not really viewed that way. The original sin is really more of a modern Christian understanding, maybe not so modern, but it's a Christian way of controlling people, and it has nothing to do with karma. So I don't think that the intent was there, that there is a lesson to be learned, because the sin was about it's not a sin. The story of Eden and of the tree. It was the tree of knowledge. So what we were being protected from is that this is again, it's a story to let us know about our responsibility as we know. So when you are ignorant, and I talk about ignorance as the original sin, because that's the sin of the world according to Jesus. So that the sin of the world that he came to save us from, not by dying, but by his teachings, is ignorance. So by now that you learn and you know what peace really means, it's based on surrender. When you go out and you try to find peace in other ways and fail and feel miserable, it's because you're still holding on to wrong teachings. So once you have knowledge, then you're responsible and you can't blame somebody else. So that's really the story of the original sin, is that God, that according to the early Hebrew writers, it's like you really want to know, or you want to live in bliss and peace and be basically just happy-go-lucky going around. And what happened after that? We started kind of like seeing ourselves as separated, seeing ourselves as men and women. All the development once she ate from the apple, once Eve and Adam ate the apple. So or the fruit that actually doesn't even say apple. For some reason, we have that image in our heads. So that the story is not about karma, because karma does not exist in the world of Allah and the Ithya Rabba, the all-knowing God. So that's the story of it wasn't about karma. Next question. Hello, my question is, this one I keep punting because it just kind of jumps into a different topic. So I'm not gonna read this one, not yet. And we have two questions came in today. How does this teaching go with being peacemakers? Perfect. Being peacemakers now is you become the pavers of the way of peace. That's your job as a so you, when people come to you, so a peacemaker, and it's like a great title in the Near East, and it's a great title in the time of Jesus. In little villages, to avoid going to court, good people go sit around the well, the town center somewhere, and something shady under a tree, and people who have issues with each other understand that these people are the peacemakers, and they are neutral in their definition. They're wiser. They've been through life. They've seen the world, over time. So usually when you go to a peacemaker, he or she listens to both people and then tries to make you surrender to one another. See, that's even the word, when you say in Arabic or in Aramaic, when you say shlama lech, peace be upon you, it really, what you're saying is, I surrender to you. So when you meet somebody, Jesus has a great, remember, because we're talking about discipleship of Christ. Let me go to this. What am I? Luke 10:5 and 6. So this will help, because it will kind of give you a little bit of dynamic of how it works. Okay. So in 10:5, now he's talking to his disciples again. He's saying, don't carry purses, because then you'll be target for people on the road to for theft and so forth. And to whatever house you enter, first say, peace be to this house. In a way, you're saying, I'm surrendering to the people of the house, and I'm surrendering to the ways of the house. And if a man of peace is there, let your peace rest upon him. And if not, your peace will return to you. Then he says, remain in that house. So if they return, right? So the dynamic of what Jesus is teaching here, again, in relation to peacemakers, if that person is the peacemaker and you come to them and you say, I surrender to you, and they take you in and they accept your surrender, then you're safe in that house. And there are a lot of tribal traditions and so forth about even if you go into an enemy's town and you declare your surrender, your peace, they have to accept that and protect you for 3 days and 3 nights. And if you're smart, on that third night, you'd pack up and bail out, because then the social contract expires the next morning, and they can come after you. So don't stay too long. But here, this is not what Jesus is talking about. So the peacemaker is somebody who can listen to the people who have an issue with one another, and then figure out how to make them surrender to each other, and how to create a lasting peace between them, a lasting surrender where they end up understanding each other's perspective. That's the job of the peacemaker. If you think about all the peace accords that we've had recently, you name it. I mean, we continue. Africa just sent a group of their representatives to Russia to see if they can negotiate peace terms on behalf of Ukraine, because Africa is suffering from the lack of Ukrainian food and grain and so for that the stuff they get. Same thing that's happening. So we see these peacemakers now. Their motivation is not compassion and understanding of what the problem is necessarily. They probably have that as a part of it. But if they walked into Russia from that perspective of let's understand and how can we stop fighting long enough to figure out what each one of us needs and wants to move on. Now you might end up with people sitting there going like, I'm going to the peacemaker, but I don't want to get peace. That you can't beat that. But at least if you can drag them there, typically good things happen. And that's the job of the peacemaker. But there's a lot of Jesus's teachings that come into it, of understanding yourself, of forgiveness, of everything else, being meek, understanding how you are as a mourner. Because if you're mourning because they killed somebody, the Roman soldiers or the Samaritans, or another tribe of killed somebody from your tribe, whether they're Jewish or non-Jewish, then your mourning translates into anger, into maybe wanting justice and so forth, human justice, not Jesus justice, or not God justice. So that's why he picks on the mourners and tell them, you will be comforted, because once you understand that whatever happened, with the rules of the kingdom, with the laws of the kingdom, then you can go past the anger stages and so forth. You still will miss those people, but you'll understand that in spirit they're still alive, and that is key to Jesus's teachings. Okay, another question. This is the last question I have. It seems like there is so much evil in the world today. How do we reconcile this with God's will? I wish I had like a straightforward answer. What we're talking about here, and what Jesus talked about, is yes, even in his time, there was a lot of evil in the world. Okay, I just mentioned a bunch of examples. The Samaritans didn't like their neighbors. The neighbors didn't like the Samaritans. People in Galilee didn't like the people in Jerusalem, and people in Jerusalem and southern Israel did not like. Israel 10 tribes did not like the 2 tribes, and the 2 tribes didn't like the 10 tribes. There was so much, and today we have a lot of people. People are, even you think about the Ukraine. a few years ago, the Ukraine was part of Russia. A lot of the people who lived there have been there as Russians. They speak Russians. Early in the war, they were bringing more and more stories of how these people are basically, brother against brother and sister against sister. And they're divided. And some of them are not fighting. They're just peaceful people in two different towns that they used to go visit each other. And what just happened one day, somebody drew a line and said, okay, we're back to calling this Ukraine and this Russia. But how do we go past it? I said in the beginning, we need to believe that these teachings will change the way. And if enough of us, similar to the early movement, if enough of us, and it doesn't take 50%, 51%, it takes enough of us, and you will rise in your community if you start practicing these. See, that's the other thing that I don't really talk much about it, but people who become the peacemakers are highly viewed and listened to in their community. People at work who are practicing these concepts are going to be the ones who are being promoted and being put in leadership positions, not because they're stepping on people and wanting more money. It's because they're behaving well and they're always balanced. Okay, so if you get enough of us in these positions, politics, business, society, community, the church, if you go to church, I tell people, don't stop going to church. This is not a replacement. This is adding to your spiritual journey. Because then if you're leading, if you're one of the people who the church listens to, that church, even with their dogma and all the stuff that comes, the baggage that comes with them, a lot of them their intent is good. A lot of the people, almost I would say not a lot, most of the people who are there because they're seeking, they're looking, and this is the best thing that they can find that resonates with them. So if you're there and you're lifting it up and higher and higher and higher, the whole society is going to lift up, and that evil will have no voice. When we stop turning the TVs off and not watching the nightly crime report and the war report and so forth, it dies down. The advertisers won't pay for it anymore. They, and a lot of channels are already doing that. They're starting with the good news. They're starting with the verified news. BBC has it used to be BBC News. Now they have a verified version of it. So people are going like, oh, should I believe you? Anybody could say anything on TV. So now they're like, doing 3 stories in an hour instead of 20 stories, but at least they're talking and they're, seismically trying to figure out if there was an explosion or not before they actually say there was an explosion. It's kind of funny, but it's great because that people are turning the TV off, going, I'm sick and tired of listening to people, pontificating, saying things that cannot be verified. And a lot of us take it, as the truth, but we're wisening up. We're starting to go like, wait a minute, I just heard 3 channels give the same news from 3 different perspectives. What's true? I'm going to turn them all 3 off. And when you do that, they're executives, they're all making money. They're going to figure out a way. It's like, how can we bring the people back? And believe me, the truth will bring people back. If you keep lying, if you keep making stuff up, people are not going to listen. So that's a part of it, is play your role in turning the TV off or turning the bad news off, that, catering one way or another. And we have, if you're in the West, you have a perspective that is anti this, and Russia was wanting to play a bigger role, but we continued to put them in the bad box group. So they eventually adopted that and put us in their bad box. So I'm not saying that, that all these leaders are followers of Jesus and they're, going to lead their nations towards this type of peace that I'm talking about. But we do not underestimate anybody. Jesus never, he knew that the 99% of us are the meek, are the peacemakers, are the mourners. And that's why he spoke to us and said, hey, go change the world, not by the sword, but with love, with understanding, with forgiveness. And I hope this gives each and every one of you a little bit of perspective on peace. And if you do, you know that we are supported by your donations. So if you've donated, we really appreciate that. And if you haven't, no pressure. We don't do this for money, but we do appreciate your giving. So with that said, have a wonderful rest of your evening. I answered all the questions, and until next week with Dr. Errico.